Hey everyone, this is Michael again, and welcome to the AEW Dynamite review. Dynamite tonight was from the Wintrust Arena in Chicago, and this was AEW Dynamite Beach Break tonight, as what they called the show. And Dynamite tonight, I thought it was a decent show in my opinion. Not as bad as it has been for weeks, but I enjoyed some of the stuff on the show tonight. Of course, we had the semifinals and the quarterfinals match in the Owen Hart Cup Tournament. And we have Bryan Danielson versus Pac. It was a semifinals match in the Owen Hart Cup Tournament. We had Willow Nightingale versus Kris Statlander. Of course, semifinals match in the Owen Hart Cup Tournament. We had Katsyuori Shibata, Hook, and Samoa Joe versus the Gates of Agony and Brian Cage. The quarterfinals match in the Owen Hart Cup Tournament was Jeff Jarrett taking on the wild card opponent, which I will get to. And then in the main event, we had Will Ospreay versus Daniel Garcia for the International Championship. But overall, Dynamite tonight, decent show was, like I said. Not as bad as the show has been in weeks. But before I get into the review, I want to give my thoughts on Forbidden Door, which was this past Sunday. It was at the UBS Arena in Long Island, here in New York. I thought Forbidden Door was a very mid-show, in my opinion. But we had 5 matches that were on the 0 Hour show, the pre-show, which they added 1 match because originally it was 4 matches on 0 Hour, the pre-show. So we had Kyle Fletcher versus Serpentico. Kyle Fletcher ended up winning the match. Of course, Sir Jabico losing another match. No surprise there. We had a 4-way tag team match. The Kings of the Black Throne, Malachi Black and Brody King versus Tomohiro Ishii, Kyle O'Reilly, Roderick Strong, Gabe Kidd, and Private Party. And we had Malachi Black and Brody King ended up winning that match, which, of course, the right guys end up winning the match. We had Will Nightingale and Tam Nakano versus Kris Statlander and Momo Watanabe tag team match. Will Nightingale and Tam Nakano ended up winning the match. Then we had Mariah May versus Saraya in the first round of the Women's Owen Hart Cup Tournament. And Mariah May ended up winning the match, defeating Saraya. Mariah May, she is going to be the one to win the Women's Owen Hart Cup Tournament. And she's going to be the one to face Toni Storm for the AEW Women's Championship at All in Wembley. So that's how the way I see it going. And then we have the Lucha Brothers and Mystico versus Los Ingobernables de Japón. This is Yoda Tsuchi, Titan, and Hiromu Takahashi. This was a trios match. And the Lucha Brothers ended up winning that match and Mystico. So no surprise there. So those were your matches that were on the 0 Hour pre-show. And then we get into the main card. We had MJF versus Hechicero, which kicked off the show, which I thought it was a okay match. Not the best match of the night. Not one of MJF's best matches, in my opinion. But MJF, he did good in the match. A lot of people love MJF. Well, watch what I get to, later on in the Dynamite review, with what happened tonight, with MJF in the after the main event. But MJF ended up winning the match. He ended up defeating Hechicero. So it was an okay match. Then we had the trios match, the Elite, Matthew and Nicholas Jackson, and Kazuchika Okada versus the Acclaimed, Anthony Bowens, the Max Caster, and Hiroshi Tanahashi. And this was a decent match here. The Elite ended up winning the match, defeating the Acclaimed. No surprise, how much the Elite is over. Then we have Bryan Danielson versus Shingo Takagi in the first round of the men's Owen Hart Cup Tournament. And this was a very good match here. Of course, if it has Bryan in it, it's going to be a very good match. And both these guys, Bryan and Takagi, end up delivering. But the outcome of the match, we all knew that Bryan was going to win it. And he did. He ended up defeating Takagi. So Bryan is now moving on in the Owen Hart Cup Tournament. Then we had the AEW Women's World Championship on the line where Timeless Toni Storm defend the title against Mina Shirakawa. Of course, Mina Shirakawa is from Stardom, and she is best friends with Mariah May, to which Mariah May was at ringside in support of both Toni Storm and Mina. And surprisingly, this was a enjoyable, decent match from these two. Mina Shirakawa, was very good in the match. Toni Storm, of course, always, good. But the outcome of the match, we all knew that Toni Storm was going to retain the title, to which she did. So she ended up retaining the Women's World Championship. But overall, it was an enjoyable match between these two. Then we had Zack Sabre Jr. versus Orange Cassidy. And this was a alright match, but not great or perfect by any means. But Zack Sabre Jr. ended up winning the match, defeating Orange Cassidy. There's that. Then you had Samoa Joe, Hook, and Katsyuori Shibata versus the Learning Tree. Chris Jericho, Big Bill, Jeff Cobb, was with Brian Keith. This was boring. Absolutely boring. We all don't care about the Learning Tree. Jericho, hi guys, hi everybody. I'm just going to stand here and wave and look like an idiot. So yeah, Samoa Joe, Hook, and Katsyuori Shibata ended up winning the match. This was your bathroom break match here. It really was. Then you had the ladder match for the TNT Championship, which, of course, with the TNT Championship was vacant because Adam Copeland had to relinquish it because of his injury. And so we had Jack Perry, Konosuke Takeshita, Mark Briscoe, Dante Martin, Leo Rush, and El Fantasmo in the match. And it was a good ladder match, in my opinion. I like Leo Rush. He was actually injured. He actually got injured in the match. But he was good in it. Mark Briscoe, it's always good to see, him in a match. I enjoyed Mark Briscoe in the ring. Very talented. But the outcome of the match, we all knew that Jack Perry was going to win the TNT Championship, to which he did. And so now all of the Elite have the gold. Jack Perry won the match. And he is your new TNT champion. Then we have Mercedes Moné versus Stephanie Vaquer. This was a winner-takes-all match for the TBS Championship and the New Japan Strong Women's Championship. This was a enjoyable match here between these two. Stephanie Vaquer, she did, decent. in the match. It's the first time I've seen her wrestle. So she did decent. But Mercedes Moné ended up winning the match. So she is the TBS champion. She retains the title. And she also wins the New Japan Strong Women's Championship. So she is a double champion. Yeah, overall, it was a enjoyable match. Then we had Tetsuya Naito versus Jon Moxley. This was for the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship. This was not good. It was not a good match in my opinion. It was boring. But in the end, Moxley ended up losing the title. Tetsuya Naito is your new IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. And of course, the main event was the AEW World Championship on the line. Swerve Strickland defended the title against Will Ospreay. Very good match. This was very good main event. Back and forth between these two. You had Don Callis out there, and at one point he wanted Will Ospreay to use a screwdriver to Swerve, but then he was opting to use it against Prince Nana, but that didn't end up happening. But in the end, Swerve Strickland ended up winning the match, and he still retains the AEW World Championship. To which I thought that Will Ospreay was going to be a double champion. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. But, I like Swerve Strickland still the AEW World Champion. But I thought it was the right move. So yeah, that was your results for Forbidden Door. Overall, it was just a meh show, in my opinion. But anyways, let's jump right into the Dynamite review. Dynamite tonight opened up with Renee Paquette. Renee ended up welcoming us to Dynamite, to which she said, "It's beach break." So Renee ended up introducing Daniel Garcia. And Daniel Garcia was challenging Will Ospreay for the International Championship later on in the night. Daniel Garcia ended up saying to Renee that it's a big night for him. He ended up saying that he respects Ospreay and puts it on his mother's life that he will not lose tonight. So MJF ended up coming in. MJF ended up saying that tonight is all about the main event match. He ended up saying that he wants to be in the corner of Daniel Garcia. So Matt Menard ended up saying everything that he has done for Daniel Garcia is alright with him. So we had MJF in Daniel Garcia's corner for the main event match. That took place later on in the night. And then we had the first match of the night. It was the semifinals match in the Owen Hart Cup Tournament. Bryan Danielson versus Pac. And this was a good match here. Really enjoyed this match between Pac and Bryan. Of course, like I said, if it has Bryan in it, it's going to be a good match. The match ended up getting underway, and we had Bryan and Pac ended up locking up. Bryan ended up taking down Pac. So the two guys end up locking up again, as Bryan ended up taking down Pac again. So Pac ended up kicking Bryan because both guys end up locking hands for the test of strength. Pac then kicked Bryan, but it did not do anything to Bryan. Bryan had Pac's head locked up, but Pac ended up countering with locking up Bryan's wrists. Bryan then got out of the hold. He ended up locking up Pac's arm. So Pac ended up trying to use the ropes to break up the hold. Pac then was out of the hold, and he ended up taking Bryan down with a leg sweep. So we had the fans there in Chicago. They were fired up, and they were chanting, let's go Bryan, let's go Pac. So the fans were divided on who they wanted to see win. So we got another lockup from both men. Pac ended up sending Bryan into the corner. Pac ended up chopping Bryan across his chest. Bryan ended up firing back with some chops to Pac. He then hit the ropes as Pac ended up on the ropes, and both Pac and Bryan ended up taking each other down. So both guys were exchanging blows to the face. Bryan ended up coming back with some uppercuts. Pac then ended up kicking Bryan with a big boot, sending him to the floor. Pac then ended up leaping the ropes, and he landed on Bryan. He then ended up sending Bryan back into the ring. So Pac ended up having Bryan locked up. Bryan ended up making it to the ropes to break up the hold, and then Dynamite went to commercial. Then when Dynamite came back from the commercial, Pac was shown kicking Bryan with some round kicks. So Bryan ended up fighting back with some punches to Pac's face. Bryan then ended up running the ropes. Pac ended up grabbing Bryan from behind, and he dropped Bryan with a German suplex. Pac was against the ropes as Bryan ended up kicking him in the chest. Bryan was going for a sliding drop kick, but Pac ended up rolling to the floor. Bryan then went to the floor, and he ended up kicking Pac. Bryan then ended up charging at Pac, but Pac ended up coming back. He ended up dropping Bryan with a thrust kick. Pac was up on the barricade, and he ended up dropping on Bryan. Pac then ended up sending Bryan back into the ring. Pac then climbed the ropes, and he ended up landing on Bryan. Pac then ended up picking up Bryan, and he pile drived him. Pac ended up going for the cover, and Bryan ended up kicking out. Bryan then ended up coming back, and he applied the label lock on Pac. So Pac ended up getting his foot on the bottom rope to break up the label lock. So Bryan ended up chopping Pac. He then ended up kicking him. Bryan ended up going to the corner. Pac ended up coming back with an elbow to Bryan. So Bryan was up on the top. Pac ended up turning around and dropped Bryan. So both guys were up on the top rope. Pac then delivered a huge brainbuster to Bryan from the top, which looked good. So Pac ended up going for the cover on Bryan, but Bryan ended up kicking out. So Pac was up on the top. He ended up coming down with the black arrow, but Bryan ended up moving out of the way. Bryan then delivered a knee to Pac. So he ended up crawling, and he ended up going for the cover on Pac, but Pac ended up kicking out, and Pac ended up countering with the brutalizer on Bryan. Bryan then ended up rolling up Pac, and Pac ended up kicking out at 2. And then when Pac kicked out at 2, Bryan immediately locked in the label lock on Pac. Pac countered, and Bryan then rolled up Pac, and there you go. Bryan ended up winning the match. So he is moving on in the Owen Hart Cup Tournament. Post-match, we had Doc Sampson. He was checking on Bryan, because points in the match, Bryan was holding his neck. And pretty much that was basically that. But overall, this was a good match between Bryan and Pac here. Very enjoyable. Both guys gave it all they got here. Wrestling was good from both of them. But it was enjoyable. And then we got Renee Paquette. Renee Paquette was backstage, and she was talking to Will Nightingale. Will Nightingale ended up saying that life can be miserable if she didn't look on the bright side. She ended up saying that Kris Statlander and Stokely Hathaway mock her. She then ended up talking about a friend who has the devil in his bloodstream. Then she then talks about a little girl who lost the TBS championship and then kicked down the door and be a 2-time Owen Hart champion. She ended up saying that she will go to Wembley and become the Women's World Champion. So pretty much that was basically what Will Nightingale had to say. And as Dynamite came back from the commercial, we saw Mark Briscoe. Mark Briscoe was in the ring. he ended up getting on the mic. He ended up saying that he is here to represent the best tag team. He ended up saying that they call him Chicken, but he is not scared of shit. He ended up saying that Jack Perry must have had some lucky charms to win the TNT Championship. He ended up saying that this week is Shark Week. So Mark Briscoe then ended up declaring himself for Team AEW in Blood and Guts. So Mark Briscoe is going to be in Blood and Guts along with the Elite. So we're going to need 4 more members for Team AEW. Briscoe ended up saying, those boys don't know what violence or blood and guts is. So he was then attacked from behind by the TNT champion, Jack Perry. So Jack Perry started beating down on Briscoe. Kyle O'Reilly ended up coming out to save Briscoe. Okada then ended up coming into the ring, and he took out both Kyle O'Reilly and Mark Briscoe. So that's when we got the Young Bucks, the EVPs, walked slowly to the ring, and the crowd started booing them. So the Bucks ended up getting into the ring, and they ended up hitting Mark Briscoe with a EVP trigger. And then the Acclaimed ended up coming out. Anthony Bowens and Max Caster, along with Billy Gunn. They ended up running down, and the Elite end up escaping out of the ring. And they escaped through the crowd, wanted nothing to do with the Acclaimed. So pretty much that was basically that. So this is all a build to Blood and Guts here. You have, like I said, Mark Briscoe, entering himself into Blood and Guts, with the Elite. So we need, 4 more people for Team AEW. But, when Jack Perry ended up coming into the ring, he clocked Briscoe with the TNT Championship. So, but overall, I thought this was a decent segment here. And then we had Renee Paquette. Renee Paquette was backstage with Toni Storm, Mariah May, and Luther. Just Renee talking to Toni Storm about, her performance at Forbidden Door, retaining the Women's World Championship. And we find out that Mariah May will be facing Hikaru Shida on Rampage this Friday. So that's set for Rampage. And then we had the semifinals match in the Owen Hart Cup Tournament for the woman, Kris Statlander versus Will Nightingale. Now we know this feud, with Statlander and Nightingale, it's okay. It's not the best feud, in my opinion. But this was a decent match here. So we had Kris Statlander end up coming out first. She was accompanied to the ring with Stokely Hathaway. And then Will Nightingale's music ended up hitting. So when Will Nightingale ended up coming out, we saw Kris Statlander got out of the ring, and she charged to Will Nightingale. So both women end up fighting on the ramp. Will then end up pushing Kris Statlander as she ended up hitting the floor. Nightingale ended up grabbing Chris's head and slammed it on the apron multiple times. And, when Will Nightingale ended up pushing Kris Statlander, she ended up rolling down the ramp, and she ended up stopping at the ring. So we had Willow end up delivering a snap suplex to Kris Statlander on the floor. And then both women got into the ring. The match ended up getting underway. We had Will Nightingale end up slamming Kris Statlander's head against the turnbuckle. Statlander came back, and she ended up raking the eyes of Will Nightingale, and then ended up dropping her with a big elbow. And then Dynamite went to commercial. Then when Dynamite came back from the commercial, Will Nightingale was in control of the match. He ended up kicking Statlander with a big boot. So both Statlander and Nightingale were on the ring apron. They were just exchanging blows to each other. So we had Will Nightingale end up holding on to the ropes. Statlander ended up trying to suplex Nightingale, but Nightingale ended up sending Statlander to the floor. Nightingale, who was still on the apron, ended up dropping Statlander with a cannonball. So Will Nightingale ended up going for the cover on Statlander. Statlander kicked out at 2. Nightingale picked up Statlander for a powerbomb, but Statlander countered and ended up kicking Nightingale. Statlander ended up going for the cover on Nightingale, and Nightingale ended up kicking out. Statlander then delivered a German suplex on Nightingale. She ended up going for the cover, and Nightingale ended up kicking out. So Nightingale ended up dropping Statlander with a big suplex. She then picked up Statlander, but Statlander ended up nailing Nightingale with a right hand. She then hoisted Nightingale up and dropped her. Statlander ended up going for the cover, and Nightingale ended up kicking out at 2. So then we saw Stokely Hathaway. Stokely Hathaway put a chain in the corner of the ring. Statlander then grabbed the chain. Stokely then distracted the ref, but Will ended up charging at Stokely as Stokely retreated off the ramp. And that led to Willow nailing Statlander from behind, and she ended up going for the cover. And there you go. Will Nightingale ended up winning the match. Overall, decent match it was here. Not great or perfect by any means, but it was decent. And then we went backstage. And we saw Renee Paquette. She was with Jeff Jarrett and his crew, Satnam Singh and Sanjay Dutt. So we had Jeff Jarrett end up walking off. And Jay Lethal ended up saying to Renee that tonight is about Jeff Jarrett honoring Owen Hart. And that's the only reason why Jeff Jarrett is in this tournament. Did he need to really be in this tournament? No. But like I said, the only reason why he's in the tournament is because he was good friends with Owen Hart. And then we had Tony Schiavone. Tony Schiavone was in the ring, and he introduced Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, to which she returned at Forbidden Door, which I forgot to explain when I gave my thoughts on Forbidden Door. But it was so awesome to see Britt Baker return at Forbidden Door. We all missed Britt Baker being on TV, but she got a big ovation at Forbidden Door when she returned, which was deservable. Tonight, she ended up getting another big ovation from the crowd in Chicago. The crowd were chanting DMD to Britt. So Britt ended up hugging Tony Schiavone, and Tony Schiavone ended up handing Britt up the mic. Fans ended up chanting, "Welcome back" to Britt. Britt got on the mic. She ended up saying that she misses everyone. She ended up saying that she thought way too long about what she was going to say. So she ended up saying, she starts with the past because she was talking about past, present, and future. Britt Baker started with the past. She ended up saying that for the last 10 months, where was she? And she ended up saying that she was injured. She ended up saying back in November, she was banged up and not mentally good. Britt ended up saying that she had blurred vision and her arm was tingly and could not open a bottle of water. She ended up saying that she spent a week in the hospital with a mini stroke. Wow, that's crazy. She's that young. She's my age. So she ended up saying Tony Khan ended up telling her to stay home and take some time. She then ended up saying now she is cleared and healthy. Britt ended up saying that she was never more nervous and unsure of herself when she came out of Forbidden Door, and that she wondered if anyone would really care. She ended up saying Sunday at Forbidden Door, when she needed AEW and when she needed the fans, she will always be the fans' corner. And Britt ended up saying that she means it from the bottom of her heart. So she ended up saying that we all have the impulse to be elite. So Britt was like, oh, well, speaking of the elite, she heard there's a new female face of AEW. And it must be so rewarding for her. She ended up saying those 3 letters, CEO. She probably earned those letters for years. Of course, she's talking about Mercedes Moné. So Britt ended up saying that the CEO has her music piped in. And the only 3 letters that matter in AEW is DMD. So then we heard a horn. And we saw the car parked in the arena, in the parking garage. It was on the big screen. Mercedes Moné ended up coming out with both the TBS Championship and the New Japan Strong Women's Championship. So she was met outside the building by the EVPs, the Young Bucks. They ended up saying that she is a CEO they can actually get behind. So the Bucks are all over on Mercedes. So balloons end up coming out. You know, the crew started putting balloons in the ring. One crew guy had to dump balloons from a bag all in the ring. So we had the championship celebration for Mercedes Moné of her being the double champion. So Britt Baker was still in the ring while all this was going down. Mercedes made her way down to the ring. So Britt then looked on from the center of the ring. Mercedes ended up receiving some boos from the crowd. So she smiled and she took in those boos from the crowd. So Mercedes got on the mic. She kept saying, "Oops, Britt, did I interrupt something?" She kept saying that it is time for Chicago to celebrate their double champion. Mercedes ended up saying that she made Forbidden Door famous. And the fans were chanting, "Shut the fuck up," to Mercedes. It's so good to not hear any censorship on AEW television than how it is on WWE television, where it's just bleeped and censored and so annoying. You know, thank God AEW doesn't do that. So Mercedes ended up telling Britt Baker to get a look at what a real star looks like. So Britt then ended up saying, "All in." She had to tell Mercedes that she was the first female to wrestle at All In. And she wrestled at All In last year, when Mercedes was looking like a broken bitch with a broken leg in the stands. So Britt Baker then challenged Mercedes at All In. So Mercedes ended up telling Britt that she needs to get in the back of the line. Britt then ended up asking Mercedes, "Oh, what line?" So Mercedes ended up saying that there is a price to pay when you mess with her. Mercedes then ended up holding up both the TBS Championship and the New Japan Strong Women's Championship, and then she ended up getting out of the ring, and that was how the segment ended. But overall, I thought this was a very good segment here. You know, Britt Baker, you know, returned to Dynamite, coming out there and, you know, saying, you know, why she was out. You know, she was banged up, you know, back in November, and she was not mentally good. Ended up saying that she had a mini stroke, you know, at a young age, Like I said, she's my age. So born the same year, 91. So, but very young to have a mini stroke. And then, of course, the whole Mercedes, celebration, was pretty good. And this all sets up, Mercedes Moné versus Britt Baker at All In Wembley. So that should be a very good match come All In. And then we had Renee Paquette. Renee Paquette was with Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher. Don Callis then came in. So Ospreay ended up asking Renee to leave. Will Ospreay ended up telling Don Callis that he just isn't the guy Don Callis wants. He ended up saying that his life has changed and that he owes Don Callis. So Will Ospreay ended up saying to Don Callis that he is done and he wants out of the Don Callis family. Don Callis ended up saying that he is not in the habit of letting people out of agreements and that he is happy what Ospreay has done. He ended up saying that he will let him out of his agreement. So both Don Callis and Will Ospreay end up hugging. Kyle Fletcher ended up leaving with Don Callis, and that was basically that. So Will Ospreay going on his own, getting away from the Don Callis family. That's, pretty good there. Oh, and then we had Jericho. Jericho comes out, makes his way down to the ring. Oh, hi guys. Hi everybody. How y'all doing tonight? So Jericho had a clipboard, thinking he was going to bring back, oh, you just made the list. So he ended up saying that he wasn't on the show. Good. We don't want to hear, hi guys, hi everybody. Because every time I hear the Learning Tree music, play, I just want to pick up my remote and mute the fucking TV. And I think that's what a lot of people want to do. Right when the Learning Tree music ended up hitting, I was like, oh, a lot of people are probably picking up their remotes, changing the channel, because nobody wants to see this shit. So Jericho ended up saying that he thought he would guest commentate, since he has to have his TV time. He ended up saying that Hook stole his move at Forbidden Door. He ended up saying that the worst is Taz, who is supposed to be biased and acted like a mark. So Jericho ended up saying that he talked to the EVPs, the Young Bucks, and if he is going to be at the commentary table, that he can't be around Jericho talking about Taz. Taz can't be around Jericho. So Jericho ended up saying that he has an executive order that says Taz has to leave the commentary table. And not only that, Taz had to leave the arena. So security was out there. Taz was escorted out of the arena. And Jericho was on commentary for the next match here, which was Samoa Joe and Katsyuori, Shibata, and Hook versus the Gates of Agony, Bishop Khan, Toa Liona, and Brian Cage. And this was boring. This match was boring, in my opinion. Samoa Joe ended up taking down Toa Liona as the match got underway. Toa Liona ended up taking in Brian Cage. Joe then tagged in Shibata. Brian Cage ended up dropping Shibata with a shoulder tackle. So Shibata ended up getting up. He ended up dropping Brian Cage. So we had Hook end up tagging in. Bishop Khan tagged in. So Hook and Khan end up going at it. Hook was sent to the floor by Khan as Dynamite went to commercial. So then, as Dynamite came back from the commercial, we had the Gates of Agony end up double teaming on Shibata. Brian Cage was tagged in, and he ended up kicking Shibata. Do Leona was tagged in. He kicked Shibata. And later on, we had Brian Cage end up picking up Shibata. He ended up dropping Shibata. Hook came in, and he delivered a DDT to Brian Cage. Hook then tagged in Joe, and Joe ended up dropping Leona in the corner. Joe then ended up kicking Brian Cage, sending him to the floor. Shibata ended up hitting Leona with a run and drop kick in the corner. And at the end of the match, we had Hook had Khan locked up. Joe had Brian Cage locked up. Shibata had Do Leona locked up. And we had the Gates of Agony and Brian Cage end up all tapping out. So Joe, Katsyuori, Shibata, and Hook ended up winning the match. Post-match, Jericho ended up coming into the ring. Big Bill ended up hitting the ring. He ended up taking out Joe and Hook with steel chairs. So Brian Keith ended up coming in. He ended up taking Shibata down. Brian Keith then ended up putting Shibata's arm in a chair, and he stomped on Shibata's arm. Jericho ended up hitting Hook with the FTW Championship. Big Bill picked up Hook, and Brian Keith had Jericho's brass knucks. And Jericho ended up nailing Hook in the head with the brass knucks. So we have Brian Keith end up retrieving a table from under the ring. Brian Keith slid it into the ring. So both him and Jericho set up the table. Big Bill picked up Hook, and Big Bill chokeslammed Hook through the table. And all you just saw was Big Bill doing this. Yeah, that's what Big Bill did. God. Slurring Tree shit is fucking awful. And yeah, Jericho walking around as the crowd's booing them in the ring. Jericho's just going, thinking he's Hulk Hogan. You know what? Yeah, so that's basically what happened. Overall, this was a boring match, in my opinion. Who gives a shit about the Learning Tree? Who does? One of the worst groups in AEW. And then we had Jeff Jarrett versus the wild card entry, the EVP's wild card entry. This was a quarterfinals match in the Owen Hart Cup Tournament. And who was the wild card? It was Hangman Adam Page. So Hangman Adam Page returned to Dynamite tonight. It was great to see Page. And this was a decent match here. So the match got underway. Both Page and Jeff Jarrett end up locking up in the center of the ring. Page ended up tossing Jarrett down. Jarrett ended up nailing Page in the mouth. Both guys end up locking up, and they both were exchanging blows to each other. Page ended up sending Jarrett down, and Page ended up nailing Jarrett with some right hands. Jarrett ended up sending Page into the ropes. Page ended up coming back, and he ended up dropping Jarrett with a lariat. Page then ended up picking up Jarrett, and he tossed Jarrett with a fallaway slam. Jarrett was up on the apron. Page then picked Jarrett up, and he powerbombed Jarrett on the ring apron. Page then ended up grabbing Jarrett's head and slammed it against the ring steps. And then Dynamite went to commercial. Then when Dynamite came back from commercial, we saw both Page and Jarrett end up falling to the floor. Jarrett ended up making it back into the ring at 8 because the ref was counting. So Page ended up making it back as the ref counted to 9. Jarrett ended up dropping Page with a Russian leg sweep. Jarrett ended up nailing Page in the jaw. Jarrett ended up going for the cover on Page, and Page ended up kicking out. Page ended up going for the Deadeye, but Jarrett countered that. Page then ended up nailing Jarrett, and dropped him with the dead eye. So Page was on the apron. Jarrett ended up staggering, and he ended up falling to his feet. Page ended up going back to the ring as Jarrett ended up shoving Page. Jarrett then applied the sharpshooter on Page, and the crowd ended up popping because that's what, Owen Hart, used to do. The sharpshooter, of course, Bret Hart, of course, does the sharpshooter as well. So Page ended up crawling, and he made it to the bottom rope to break up the sharpshooter. Page ended up sending Jarrett against the ropes. Page then ended up nailing Jarrett with the buckshot lariat. And then Page ended up nailing Jarrett with some rights. Page then picked up Jarrett and dropped him with a dead eye. So Page ended up going for the cover. And there you go. Hangman Adam Page ended up winning the match. So he now moves on in the Owen Hart Cup Tournament. But it's awesome that Hangman Adam Page is back. It's good to see him. He's been out for a while. But overall, decent match it was. And then we went backstage. And we were going to get an update on Hook. So Bryan Keith, Big Bill, and Chris Jericho end up attacking Hook. We had, I think, Chris Jericho end up tossing a fireball in Hook's face. Hook ended up going down screaming as a trainer ended up checking on Hook. And then all you just hear is Jericho go, "Bye, guys." God. I don't care. I really don't. Really? A fireball in Hook's face? Really? And as Dynamite came back from the commercial, we saw Renee Paquette. Renee Paquette was trying to talk with Hangman Adam Page, and the EVPs, the Young Bucks, ended up coming over to Page, and both of the Bucks ended up hugging Page, and they ended up telling Page that as long as he scratches their back, they will scratch his. The Bucks ended up saying that they lifted Page's suspension because, they end up saying that Page was suspended and that they need a fifth man for Blood and Guts. Page ended up grabbing Nicholas, and he ended up saying that he is not their puppet. He ended up saying that he is in the Owen Hart Cup Tournament and that he doesn't need the Bucks. And that was basically that. So Page is all out, for himself. He don't need the Bucks. These are the guys that gave him a suspension. So that all came back on the Bucks. Main event: Will Ospreay versus Daniel Garcia for the International Championship. And this was a very good main event here. Of course, MJF was in Daniel Garcia's corner. And the match, went, over an overrun because at 10 o'clock the match was still going on. So both guys ended up blocking up as the bell rang, and they ended up pinning the ropes. Daniel Garcia ended up sending Ospreay against the ropes. Ospreay ended up dropping Daniel Garcia with a shoulder block. Daniel Garcia was dropped, and he ended up going to the corner. Both men ended up running the ropes. Daniel Garcia ended up taking down Ospreay. Daniel Garcia then ended up having Ospreay in the head scissors. He then chopped at Ospreay. So Daniel Garcia then ended up grabbing Ospreay and snapped him down. Daniel Garcia had Ospreay's head locked up. Ospreay was in the corner as Daniel Garcia ended up nailing him with some right hands. Ospreay ended up sending Daniel Garcia out to the floor. Ospreay ended up leaping over the ropes, and he landed on Daniel Garcia on the floor. And we got a stare down between Ospreay and MJF. And then Dynamite went to commercial. Then when Dynamite came back from the commercial, Daniel Garcia was up as Ospreay ended up slapping Daniel Garcia. Ospreay ended up hitting Garcia again, but it fired Garcia up. Daniel Garcia ended up coming back with some right hands, and then he ended up delivering a kick to Ospreay's jaw. Daniel Garcia ended up suplexing Ospreay, and then he delivered a DDT to Ospreay. Daniel Garcia ended up dropping Ospreay with a big neck breaker. He ended up going for the cover, and Ospreay ended up kicking out. So we had Ospreay end up leaping off the second rope. He connected with a right hand on Daniel Garcia. Ospreay ended up going for the cover, and Daniel Garcia ended up kicking out. We had Ospreay then ended up picking up Garcia, ended up kicking him in the face. So we had Daniel Garcia ended up running the ropes as Ospreay ended up catching Daniel Garcia, flipped him on his back, and he ended up going for the cover on Garcia, to which Garcia ended up kicking out. So at the end of the match, we had MJF. He put his Dynamite diamond ring in the corner. Daniel Garcia picked up the Dynamite diamond ring. So both Daniel Garcia and Ospreay were making pin attempts. Daniel Garcia ended up dropping Ospreay, and he still had the ring. Daniel Garcia ended up pinning the Dynamite diamond ring to MJF. So Ospreay from behind ended up pinning the Tiger Driver on Daniel Garcia. And he ended up going for the cover, and there you go. Will Ospreay ended up winning the match, retaining the International Championship. Post-match, Daniel Garcia was in the corner. He was all emotional. Ospreay tried to talk to Daniel Garcia, and he ended up telling him that he is family and that he can do it. MJF then ended up coming into the ring as Ospreay got out of the ring. MJF then ended up saying to Daniel Garcia that it's on him and not, Daniel Garcia. And that these people still love him. So MJF then ended up getting Daniel Garcia to his feet. So MJF then low blowed Daniel Garcia. And, of course, MJF ends up turning heel. This is the MJF that we all know and love. We all love cocky, prick MJF. So MJF ended up getting the Dynamite diamond ring, and he put it on. Matt Menard, Daddy Magic, ended up coming to try to make the save for Daniel Garcia, but MJF ended up nailing Matt Menard with the ring. So as Daniel Garcia ended up getting to his feet, MJF ended up nailing Daniel Garcia. He was nailing Daniel Garcia with the ring. So the fans ended up booing MJF. MJF ended up telling the fans to shut up. And that's when we saw Daniel Garcia was bleeding profusely from the Dynamite diamond ring. So security started to come down. MJF ended up taking out the security. MJF then ended up nailing Daniel Garcia with some right hands. MJF then picked up Daniel Garcia, who was all still very bloody, and he ended up dropping Daniel Garcia. And Daniel Garcia's blood was all over MJF's undershirt. MJF ended up picking Daniel Garcia up again, and it cut to Matt Menard, Daddy Magic. He was also bleeding profusely on the floor because MJF ended up hitting him with the Dynamite diamond ring. So MJF had Daniel Garcia up on the second rope. Officials ended up trying to stop MJF, but MJF ended up dropping Daniel Garcia on his head from the second rope. Christopher Daniels, who is their Adam Pearce. Christopher Daniels was shown shouting at MJF as to why MJF ended up doing this. So MJF ended up fighting off the officials. Will Ospreay ran back into the ring from the back. MJF ended up retreating through the crowd. MJF was jawing at fans because the fans looked like they were getting physical with MJF. And all we just saw was the EMTs coming out. The EMTs had a stretcher. EMTs ended up putting Daniel Garcia in a neck brace. and they end up stretchering Daniel Garcia out of the ring. Ospreay was looking all very concerned, and Daniel Garcia was being wheeled out on a stretcher as Dynamite went off the air. But really happy that we got the MJF that we all know and love again, the prickish, dickish MJF. He works a lot better as a heel. I liked his babyface run, but we all associate MJF with him being a heel. And it's going to lead to MJF, and Daniel Garcia, going at it. But overall, Dynamite tonight, decent show it was, in my opinion. But anyways, that's it for my review of Dynamite. Thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Definitely give the video a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and until next video, I'll see you all later.